You're listening to Keeping Up with the Knights, a podcast for the faculty and staff at Steele High School, allowing them to connect outside of the classroom. Teacher, coach, mentor, and speaker Michael Herrera, a past District Teacher of the Year, will sit down with fellow teachers and bring their stories to life. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these stories as they unfold on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights.
Welcome back to Keeping Up with the Knights. Today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Johanna House, a health science teacher of the last 3 years in the CTE Department. If anyone knows Johanna, they know she's an amazing person and she has the kindest of hearts. She teaches medical terminology and principles of health science. Please help me welcome Johanna House to episode 9 of Keeping Up with the Knights. Welcome back to Keeping Up with the Knights. This is Coach Herrera talking, and I have the wonderful privilege of sitting down with who I call Momma House. So, Jojo, thank you for joining me on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so to start off, what I usually do is I always start off with 5 questions just to kind of get the audience a chance to get to know you as well as myself. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. Here we go with question number 1. All right, so if you were to go back in time and high-five yourself for something that you did previously, what would you high-five yourself for and why?
Making it through having a child, because I was all for having a kid until I got in that hospital and I had to be induced with my first son. And, you know, if I could have backed out at that point, I probably would have. I was very scared. I wasn't in labor. And so it was just like, I'd never been in the hospital before for anything. I'd never had a surgery. And I was really freaking out. And you know what? It ended up being fine. And, you know, I did it a couple more times after that. I had a few more and it's all good. So
it's not one of my questions, but just so our audience knows, like, so you have 3. What are their names, ages, and are they boy and girl?
I have Cameron, who will be 7 on Saturday. I have Cairo, who is 4, and August, baby girl, is 1.5. So 2 boys and a girl.
Awesome. The joys of your life, right?
Yes.
All right. Question number 2. What would you tell a younger you if you could?
Don't overthink everything. I still do that to this day. This whole pandemic has made me, even teaching through it, has made it better for me, because I tend to be anxious about everything, and the fact that it's a good thing. I tend to see things from multiple perspectives, and I always try to consider other people's perspectives and think about what it would be like on the other side of something. But that makes me just overthink and worry more than is necessary, especially as a kid. I was always kind of a serious kid and young adult. So yeah, it's all going to be fine.
Listening to you answer that question actually makes me think, because you know me. I mean, we know each other pretty well. I am super analytical. But I don't know if I was that way as a kid. So I was like, when you were talking, I was like, man, was I like that as a kid? I mean, I had that OCD in me as a kid, but I don't know if I was so analytical as I am now. But anyway, that when you were talking, it just made me think about that, to think. But the other thing that you just mentioned right there is so true. And I feel like COVID, although, and I'll be honest with you, like this remote teaching and in-person teaching has got us all flustered, right? Yeah. We all have our issues with this. But I think the positive that comes out of this right now is that it allows us to be more empathetic, because we have these kids that are at home for whatever reason, and it does force you in a way to kind of rethink what some of those kids are doing at home and why they're doing those things. And so let's fast forward to next year, and we have all of our kids in our classroom. It allows us the opportunity to remember that every kid has a story. Every kid has their struggles. And sometimes we can just take a pause and take a deep breath and remember what it's like to be a kid. So thank you for sharing that, because that's so true. All right. If you were not a teacher, what would you be doing as a profession?
God, I think about this all the time. I tell my students, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So I always thought I'd be like a physical therapist or something, but I think about actually doing that job, and I don't know. Just teaching is such a good mix, because some days I don't know. I think sometimes I would like to be in an office and have a straight like 9 to 5 so that when I go home, I can fully be home. Teaching, we always think about our babies and planning for the next day or, grading the stuff from the day before. But, I really don't know. I'm always thinking about it. So physical
So
therapy,
would
I've
it be
thought
in
about
healthcare?
accounting. Huh?
Would you just do something in healthcare?
Maybe. I've considered that. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's part of the dilemma is like you could do anything. So I don't really know.
All right. Fair enough. Next question I have for you is, do you collect anything? Like, is there anything at your home? If we were to walk in and we just see like, the House family, they apparently collect.
Well, I was saying no, absolutely not. Because as a child, I was a hoarder. Like, not like disgusting, but I would had a hard time getting rid of things. My mom would have to go through my closet and clean out like old church bulletins because I feel like I needed to keep all of them. And I collected rocks and I collected stamps and I collected coins. And now I'm like, get rid of it, get rid of everything. But if you walked into my house, I mean, like plants maybe would be a thing because I just love having plants in and something living and to take care of. And it just makes me feel happy. So I do have lots of plants around.
Indoor and outdoor?
Mostly indoor. It's super windy at my house. I would love to have some outdoor stuff. I'm working on a plan for that, but I have like a garden, but. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then question number 5, I'm assuming you watch TV, and if you do and you have a DVR, what was the last show you recorded?
I don't watch anything. I mean.
You really don't?
No, I watched the debate last night. That's it.
Yeah?
I mean, and that's rare for me to sit down.
So
and
do you have a DVR though to record? You just don't use it?
No, I don't even have, we haven't had, people are like cord cutting and stuff like we did this 10 years ago. We haven't had cable. I mean, we have Netflix and we have the kids shows that they don't even watch TV that much. It's not our thing.
All right. Well, there you go. All right. Well, there's my 5 questions. It's your turn now.
Okay. If you were famous, what would it be for?
Like now, or like when I was a kid, if I were to be famous? Like,
up to you.
All right, check this out. So I've mentioned this before on an episode. You may or may not know this, but I was gifted an instrument from a student that graduated from here a long time ago.
Yep.
He's since passed away with cancer, and he gave me a handpan. And there's a couple of artists that I just watch on YouTube or I listen to handpan music. I would want to be famous right now for a lot of things. Like, obviously, I would be like an NBA coach or something like that, right? But I think most people know that about me, that it would probably be something with sports or basketball or coaching. I would want to be famous for my abilities to play this musical instrument called the handpan.
Okay. Interesting. Would you rather always sweat or always cry?
What a weird question. Always. That's like eternity. Like always cry or always.
Your eyes are always dripping or you're always sweaty.
Okay, I'm going to go with cry because if I'm sweating, that means I probably stink and I can't do that. Like, no, I'm not dealing with that. And then if I ever do go exercise, like I have to take a shower right away. I can't just like dry off and then go back to what I was doing. So no, I can't do that. So I'm going to go with cry.
Okay. What's your biggest pet peeve?
God, I have so many. The first one that comes to mind right now is, and I've got many of them, but I can't say my biggest. You know what? No, I'm going to change my answer in my head. I was going to say eye contact with people when you're talking to them, but my biggest pet peeve is when things aren't clean. Like my desk, don't touch my desk. Like I've got everything in color coordinates. Like my closet is all color coordinated. My house is very clean. So I would have to say a messy room or just a messy environment is probably my biggest pet peeve. It gets my blood pressure going.
So are we talking clean, like dirt clean, or tidy, or both?
Probably both. Yeah, because I can't stand anything that's dirty on the floor, as well as like toys and stuff like it. Every day the house has to be clean.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your favorite food? Let's just go simple.
I'd have to probably go like pastas. I love pastas. I love the bad pastas. So the thick Alfredo, like the vodka Alfredo sauce kind of stuff. I don't eat it a lot. But I'd have to go with the pasta route for sure.
I find those interesting because I can't pick a favorite anything. So I'm always interested when people can actually pick a favorite. What is your thing, like the thing that defines you, like your thing outside of work and school and coaching, something that we don't know?
So like I'm a real I love learning. So I love to read books. I love to watch motivational videos or listen to them in the car. Last year, this was kind of my thing last year, on the way to work every day, I would play a motivational video in my truck. As soon as I got into my truck, I would just go to my page on my YouTube channel and I would click play. And if it was a 5-minute video, 10-minute video, and I'd listen to it before I listened to music or anything else. But I guess my thing is like reading books and just absorbing information. And now it's kind of like listening to podcasts, which allows me to also learn from other people as well. So anything that I can listen to or watch that makes me a better person is kind of my thing. That was your 5?
That's 5.
All right, sweet. All right, well, let's get into this. So I feel like, again, you and I know each other pretty well, but maybe the audience that's listening, or maybe they're even a new teacher and they don't really know Coach House. So if you can just start off by talking about your childhood, where you grew up, what your family environment was like.
I was actually born in Kansas, in Manhattan. My dad was in grad school, but I was just born there. I don't think I lived there very long. Then we lived in Waco. I think my dad was then at Baylor. No, he was just teaching there. He did get his undergrad at Baylor. Both my parents had met at Baylor. And then around right before before kindergarten, we moved to Louisiana. And I grew up in Pineville, Louisiana, a very small town in central Louisiana, for all of my elementary school years. So it lined up for me perfectly. I went from kindergarten to 5th grade. And when I was transitioning, we moved back to Waco. My dad he was a professor at Louisiana College. My mom's a psychologist and was just a school psychologist there. It worked out that my mom got accepted to the CTE program to get her doctorate in psychology at Baylor. And my dad got a job as a professor at Baylor. So we moved to Waco when I went to 6th grade. For my brother, it was not as good transitional years, but worked out well for me. And then I just grew up in Waco from then until, the end of high school. Went to Waco High School. And then for college, I went to Southwestern University and played basketball. And that's just in Georgetown. So I've been in Texas most of my growing up years, but elementary was totally separate. So it was an interesting.
That's crazy. So you grew up in a house of educators or like-minded people. Did that have an influence on you to become a teacher, do you think?
I think definitely. It just seemed natural for me too. I definitely didn't grow up saying I wanted to be a teacher and coach. I wanted to be like a marine biologist and then a physical therapist. And it just comes naturally. I think it was just this is a fit for me. And my dad, was a teacher and professor, and my mom has taught classes, and we've just, like you said, always been around education. So I just, and I kind of awesome. I had a kid ask me my first year teaching, what made you want to get into teaching and coaching? And honestly, at that point, it was just we'll try it, but in all reality, I was coaching and I was at the middle school, and it was just really to empower girls, because we haven't always been allowed to play sports. And I think it's a good way for girls to find their footing in life and to find some of their power and confidence. So
awesome. All right. So you mentioned that you went to Southwestern. So I want you to kind of take us there a little bit, maybe share some experiences that you had in college that may have stood with you over the years.
It was a different experience because it's a really small school. It's probably, equal in size or smaller than my high school as far as number of people or students. So I went from a really big, 6A high school to this really small private school college. And the demographics are very different. But playing basketball was really, that's why I went. And it was a really good education, really a small school, small classes. I don't know what a big college scene is like. But really basketball took up all of it. You played, we in our conference at that time, we would, drive or fly to one site and play on a Friday, and then drive to the next one and play on a Sunday, and then fly home. So we were, traveling, and it was really fun for a little Division III school. We did lots of traveling, got lots of experiences. That was really what made up my my college life.
All
So
right. So let's talk. I know this is like education, but I want to know about these basketball stories here. So, all right, jersey number.
in college, I was 10. I
Okay.
was 12 all growing up, but it was taken when I got there. And my dad and my brother were 10, so I was 10 in college.
All right, number 10. What position?
Point guard through high school, and then wing, 2-3 in college.
All right. Are you a paint scorer or a 3-point shooter?
Paint.
Paint.
I was
All
no
right.
good. I wasn't the best shooter.
That's crazy, man. I like that. We can talk hoops in an educational podcast. All right. So then after you graduated, somewhere along the lines in college, education came apart where it like this epiphany moment that you wanted to get into education. Well, let me back up. What was your major in college?
Kinesiology.
Okay, kinesiology. And then, I guess back then that's kind of what you were thinking about doing. You wanted to like maybe go in into physical therapy or something like that.
Yeah, I was actually in the athletic training program and went all the way through it, and then decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I never like tested to get my certification or anything, because I realized the hours that they put in, and they're very dedicated, but I knew that if I was going to put in those hours, I wanted to coach.
And so that came to fruition when, like maybe senior year?
Yeah, my senior year. And also, like, I realized if someone actually broke their leg and their bone was sticking out and I had to be the first responder, I couldn't do it.
Well,
So
we have similar stories too, because when I was in college, my first semester, that's actually why I went to the University of Tulsa, is because at that time, this was what, 1998, there were only like 4 or 5 schools in the entire country that were actually accredited as National Athletic Training Association programs. And so University of Tulsa was one. I believe University of Miami was another one, which I applied and got accepted to there too. But man, that first semester, when you realize how many hours athletic trainers put in, that's what allows me the appreciation I have for athletic trainers.
oh yeah.
Because you're there before, you're there during, and then you're there after all the athletes have left. And I needed to work. I was part of a work study program, so I couldn't do it anymore. And that's when I switched over to exercise sports science. So we kind of have some similar stories there. But so then you graduated. You realized that maybe this physical therapy is not going to go. So how did education kind of come into you actually doing something about it? And so did you do a master's or did you do alternative certification? What'd you do?
I did alternative. I was actually going to stay a 5th year at Southwestern. I was on tuition exchange with Baylor because my dad's a professor there. And so, they said, yeah, that's fine. Well, when I was about to start that last year, they said, oh, it's not for sister schools, whatever. I wasn't going to pay Southwestern's tuition for a 5th year. So in that 5th year, I would have done my internship like in a school, and then I was going to have a minor in sociology. So I just kind of dropped all that and did my final class, my capstone class, and graduated in December instead. So it was like kind of always on the table. At one point I was doing adapted PE as my, not my major, but I took some of those classes and did some hours with the teachers in Georgetown. So it was always just kind of like would probably, I don't know if it was a backup or just kind of like a side plan, a parallel plan. Like, I don't know what I want to do, so I'll plan for both. And then I got out and I actually worked at Georgetown Sporting Goods, kind of like the people Cardinal, who sells us our gear. I was the in-house person and placing the orders and talking to coaches and kind of that end of everything. And when I was there, that's kind of when alternative certification started becoming a big deal or more of a thing. And I was like, well, I'm just going to take a week off and go through all the classes. At that point, it wasn't all online. It was like part online, part you had to go in person. And I just took a week and I went, the week was like the in-class part, and did my alternative certification. And it was initially PE and health. And then when I ended up getting a job back in Waco. And I worked at a middle school for a couple years, and they wanted me to come to the high school to coach basketball and track. And but I needed a high school. They didn't have a PE health position, right? Normal.
Right.
So that's when I was like, hey, if there's, an anatomy class or something, I would love to teach that stuff. And they, looked at the hours I had and the experience I had and like, oh my gosh, you can actually do health science. And so I tested out and here we are.
So take me back. So it was your 5th year.
Mm-hmm.
And then after your 5th year, how long between then and getting your first job was it? Your
Teaching
first
job?
teaching job, yeah.
Well, actually, backtrack. During that time, or like my first year that I graduated, I worked at a private school as the PE teacher there in Georgetown. My college coach was like the AD. At that time, she might have just been a parent. Now she's the AD and something there. And so I was the PE teacher from, preschool to high school at this. We didn't have a gym. We just were outside. We had a shed and some random equipment, and I would just, go and teach PE. At that point is when I got married that year. Yeah. And then, I don't know, I haven't done a timeline in a while. You're making me go way back. So I started teaching almost immediately, but I wasn't certified. And then obviously I liked it. And I was working, a regular desk job, which I liked as well, but I need to talk to people more. So as soon as I got my alternative certification, within that next year, I got the job in Waco, but I was in Georgetown and we were living in Austin, and, getting your foot in the door, I didn't until I went home to Waco. So.
And then, so you went home to Waco, and so what all schools have you worked at?
I was at Tennyson Middle School for 2 years. I was at Waco High School for a year. And then I was at New Braunfels Middle School for 5 years. And then I was at here. and then I've been here.
And you've been at Steele for how many years now?
This is my 4th year.
4th year. And we're so glad to have you. All right. Well, thanks for taking me through your journey here. So let's get into more of like the serious questions, right? So I just want to know, back when you kind of made that decision to get into teaching, and then including now, I just want to know if you can tell me and tell the audience, why is it that you teach?
I teach because I care about kids. At the end of the day, they're going to learn in my class, and we're going to learn all the things we're supposed to learn. Yes. But they're going to know somebody cares about them more than anything else. They're going to know they have somebody they can talk to. They're going to know that someone's in their corner. If they've never had it before, even if they have a whole cheering squad, they have one more now. And I just really enjoy interacting with kids and letting them know that I've got their back. And that's it. I just really like interacting with people and having, relationships with other coaches and teachers and the kids. And I don't know. That's why.
So, I asked a question like that on why people teach. And, although I've now interviewed, I think you're number 10 or 11, somewhere around there. I don't really remember how many. They're all sitting in my Google Drive at the moment, but everybody has a similar answer, about kids. They love kids. They want to, empower kids and give kids a voice and all this kind of stuff. And yes, it sounds great. That's what I want to hear, because I feel like that's why I'm in this profession, is not because I want to, don't get me wrong, I want to teach health science, but there's more to health science. I want to teach them life lessons. I want to teach them what it's like to be a young adult into an adult. I want to model for them with pictures of my kids up here and my family, so they understand what a married couple looks like. And nothing's perfect, don't get me wrong, but for myself, growing up in a family environment that was divided, with my parents having a divorce, that allows me to hopefully mentor some young men or maybe some young women who are going through the same thing, and let them know my story as well. And so what I'm getting at is, everybody so far is giving me this answer. So where do you think, for some teachers, and I'm not saying even here at Steele High School, but just in education in general, where do you think that gets lost in translation? Meaning, you have these teachers that don't necessarily care about the kid, or they're more concerned about their content or their project or their lesson or their PowerPoint. And you walk down these halls and they're lecturing and lecturing and lecturing, and you look at kids' heads down and they're sleeping, and it's like, but they're still going on and on and on. So why do you think that happens? Why do you think teachers sometimes lose their why?
I don't know, because it gets challenging at times for sure. I think the standard, and I can't imagine being a core teacher and having to meet certain goals and deadlines and have kids test at a certain level to prove that you're doing your job well, because I don't think proves that you're doing or disproves that you're not doing your job. But having the stress of that, like shout out to core teachers, I couldn't imagine. And having to get through your curriculum at a certain pace and that being important. Or maybe I just think some people are wired differently. Like I said, I don't know if I said this to you, I was having a conversation before we did this, but like teaching through the pandemic and having kids in class and at home has made me a little like less anxious because something's going to go wrong. And obviously like however many years I'm into this, like over a decade, I've realized that, but I still get nervous. Like I don't want to have too much time, be finished too early. I don't want it to go too long, and I don't know how long the assignment will last. But some people can't like get out of that, I would imagine, and you have a certain amount of things you need to get through, and some kids just aren't gonna, I don't know, gonna pick their head up that day. But hopefully you're checking on them and figuring out why and catching them up to speed later, because at the end of the day, that's the goal, is they learn your content, not just that you present it to them.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it and I've said this before, I just, not having gone through a degree program in education, so I'm only speaking on what I think, but I'm pretty sure there's no chapter or even a textbook called relationships for teaching. But yet when I ask you guys the answer why you teach, it's always the kids. I got into teaching because of kids, right? But where is that taught? And you said it yourself. It's kind of like it's in you. It's innate. It's your why, you know?
But I don't know that it's everyone's. I mean, yes, the people you've asked, and it's the right answer, but I don't know that that's everyone's why. I mean, some people think we just have a good schedule. And I haven't ever heard a teacher. I mean, yeah, we like having summers off, even though, you know, but it's, maybe that's what people want. Maybe they want.
I guess more interviews that I do here, maybe I'll come across some teachers that may give me a different answer. In my opinion, that the good teachers are probably going to answer something to some regards as it's about the kids. It's about relationships. It's about life lessons. I think the good teachers are, I know that sounds bad, but it's just my opinion. I just feel like the good teachers are going to emphasize that in their why, and it probably it's conveyed in their classroom with the students. So if we were to sit here and have a podcast with students, the people that I've interviewed so far, I bet you the students could probably say that about the teacher. Mm-hmm. It's obviously very apparent, you know?
Well, I mean, some teachers might think you and I might look in and see them just lecturing about that. Maybe their way of showing they care about kids. They may not realize, honestly, realize they've lost their fire, realize that they're not getting through to kids because this is how it's always been done, or this is how it's like a love language. You imagine, like, I think I'm showing my husband that I care about him by doing whatever, but really that doesn't speak to him. So it doesn't really speak to the kids, but you're not realizing it. And just being like self-aware, I think, as teachers, and having these conversations, I think keeping it relevant definitely matters. I mean, like having relationships outside of the kids with your peers, with other coworkers, will help you have a little bit of a fire and a little bit of feedback on things like that.
Mic drop moment. Well said, Coach House. All right, so my next question for you is, what is your definition of success in your classroom?
That's a good question. Probably one I should have asked myself before. Honestly, on a day-to-day basis, the definition of success is like when I hear kids talking to each other, specifically about content. I mean, I teach medical terminology, so if I can even just get them to grab a buddy and want to like study and want to, go through things, or teaching each other something that someone else didn't understand, because you get a lot of this, like, you got it? Sure. And then you give them something to do with it. Like today we did a project, and I have, they're in groups. So there is always a natural leader and someone who's maybe a little, and I just saw them actually interacting, which we don't get a lot of now, especially, and I can't see their facial expressions, which is really hard. But just my kids actually knowing each other. I used to make them quiz over like the names of everyone in their class, and they thought I was so silly, but you're going to be in class with someone every day for a year. You need to know everyone's name. And so to me, that the humanity of it, getting to know each other, interacting with each other, and learning how to teach and interact and be there for one another is success in my class.
No, I like that. I definitely have never done something like that where I've quizzed my kids on the names, but through doing these podcasts, that's what I always want to try to do is for the people listening. I want to try through conversations like I'm having with you, give other teachers ideas of what we're all doing. For example, like, Christian Langford talked about what she does every single day of her week. I want to be able to allow people to listen because they may not stop and talk to Christian because they don't know her. They're not in her department or whatever, excuse you want to put into the book.
Gosh, her daily things are goals. Like, I would love to do something like that. I can't even wrap my mind around how she's prepared for that all the time. It's amazing though. Amazing.
But see, that's kind of like the thing. Like, so you know what? And I know that like that's goals. And I think that's amazing what she's doing. But something as simple as what you just said, quizzing your kids over the kids' names in their own class. Who sits to your left, your right, in front of you, behind you, across from you? What are their names? Again, that is that relationship piece. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're giving them assignment, not just to give them an assignment, but because you know your kids' names. You want them, and you create that family environment. So I think that's a takeaway. It doesn't have to be something, extravagant. It can be something as simple as giving your kids, hey, I'm just letting y'all know at the end of the week, you guys are going to be quizzed on each other's names, and y'all can quiz me too, and that's a takeaway. And that's kind of why I want to do these podcasts too, is to give teachers ideas. We do focus walkthroughs. Courtney Matthews mentioned in her podcast episode that she really liked that because you get to go into someone else's classroom, although you're probably checking a box for an admin on and doing focus walkthroughs. But the takeaway for the teachers are you're kind of looking around and looking how they decorate their classrooms, where's their objective and all the kind of things that teachers do. So I appreciate it. That's a good little takeaway right there for teachers out there listening. Quiz your students and see if they know each other's names. I like that. So take you back to your own educational career, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, or even college. Was there a teacher that you will always remember, and what about them made them so special?
I have several. I have so many. I just feel like I had lots of good teachers, and I always really like to learn. Having a kiddo in elementary school now who is very bright and loves to learn as well. Like, I can just imagine. I always put myself in my parents' shoes, like imagining being them and having me as a kid. But I had really good. My kindergarten teacher was amazing. I remember learning French in 3rd grade with my teacher. But today I was actually talking to a kid about chemistry, and they said, "Oh, chemistry is so hard." And I said, well, yeah, but I lucked out. I liked it because I had an amazing teacher, and her name was Miss Robinson, and she was at Waco High School, and she just made chemistry so fun and easy to understand. And she gave things called quizzy poos, and she explained to us, because of the grading policy, I don't know what it was at the time. I'm not sure we even really understood, but we knew that because it was called a quizzy poo, we could redo it, or it was only worth so many points, or it encouraged us to want to go make corrections and learn what we did wrong. And my husband actually had the same teacher, and they went and did, chemistry experiments at elementary schools. And so she was just so involved. And then Miss Spiegel, my math teacher in high school, she was just amazing as well. She just was really good. We all had good relationships with these teachers too. We would talk to them about everything. It probably shouldn't have, but I'd pick up her daughter from school, and and I'm still friends with them to this day. So yeah.
That's awesome. So you still keep in touch with those teachers. Mm-hmm. That, I asked you a question about your definition of success, and, without talking too much about this, that's kind of my definition of success, is when in education, our students come back to visit, they give you those thank you notes, and it's no longer about what I taught you. It's about what I gave to you. I gave you life lessons, things that you're able to use in your life. And that's my definition of success too. But at the same time, you just mentioned how you still keep in touch with your teachers. Why? You keep in touch with your teachers because they did something for you. They stood for something that had an impact on you outside of the classroom. right? And that's why you keep in touch with them today. So that's kind of what I like to do. I had it on my board for the entire year last year, what my why statement was. And so anytime, the kids know that Coach Herrera, when he gets started talking, like, it's hard for me to stop because I just love telling stories and stuff. But I always tell them, like, I just point to the board. Like, there's my why, and in order for me to get to know you, you've got to get to know me too, which means I need to be vulnerable enough to kind of tell you my story and tell you like it is. And the kids are listening, even the kids that look like they're not listening.
Oh yeah.
You might say something and they got their head down, and you'll say something and they're like, and that's all I need. I just need that kind of nonverbal exchange to know that you are listening to me and you hear what I'm trying to do. So, all right. So has there been a pivotal moment in your educational career that you'll never forget? Now, as a teacher, so maybe a story about a student, obviously without mentioning names, where you just feel like it has been some amazing story that either changed your mindset, changed their mindset, just a pivotal moment in your career so far as a teacher.
I don't know.
As a coach, as a teacher, I'm sure you've had some crazy I shouldn't say crazy. You've had some probably life lesson type conversations with some young ladies and or young men that you just, you kind of had one of those moments. Like, I love this job. I love doing what I do.
Yeah, I mean, several. It's just sometimes it gets really hard, or you feel like, oh, there's so many things we have to do. And then you have that kid tell you, like, reach out and say, like, I appreciate, whenever I first moved from Waco, I taught seniors. I was super young when I was teaching at Waco High. I was like, 24. Some of y'all babies here are that age. And so I had kids who were, 19. I mean, one of my students in my class ended up marrying a girl that I went to school with. Like, and it's not inappropriate. She wasn't a teacher or anything, but like, because our age was very close. And so as soon as I left there, my kids are in college. And so one of them posted on Facebook, like, like having a class, or the perfect class would be a combination of this one teacher and Coach House's. It was something about the content and how his lectures were, and Coach House's for like the relationship and like the community of the classroom. And it was when I had just moved and everything was new, and I was, that was my first year in the classroom. I was a PE teacher before, and so I had 1 year experience. She was I was a newbie, and she still felt that from my class. And I thought, okay, I'm doing something all right, So, and then, I have another kiddo that I keep up with from that same class that, now she's like legitimately a nurse on the front lines with COVID, and I keep up with her, and I'm just so proud to have had a little moment of those kids' lives,
And it's always amazing when they keep in touch and they tell you those stories, and the least expected ones. We have relationships with kids in our classrooms, but some kind of evolve more than other relationships, right? For whatever reason, whether they're, a track athlete or they're a HOSA member or something, there's just some students that you just build strong relationships with. But so some of those are kind of expected when they come down the line, which I know it sounds bad, but it's not that I'm expecting it, but you're kind of like, well, you've got this relationship. And so when they reach out and they say, thank you, it's kind of, it's kind of common. But the kid, that's the uncommon one, the one that sends you that message and you're like, wait a minute, I thought you hated me as your teacher, or whatever. And they send you those messages or thank you, but for sure. All right. So let's talk about the hypothetical teacher here. What makes a teacher amazing?
I think being engaging. I feel the best about my day when we're doing something the whole day. I know that we have to have lecture days in my class. We have to have vocab days, and you have to have testing days. But like when we're doing something together and learning, and it's hands-on, and I think that's what's the question? A good teacher?
Like an amazing teacher. Like what makes a teacher amazing?
That being engaging, like I think having that balance of like your content and preparedness and the relationship and awareness of kids and where they're coming from. And being socially aware, like you were saying, of where they're coming from and how they may perceive something you say or something you're presenting or whatever, just being, I think, a balance of those two, because you could be super knowledgeable in your subject and your presentation is not what you think it is, or maybe, your relationship with the kids doesn't allow it to be everything it should be. And so I think it's someone who has a balance of the two.
Very good. Well said. Do you think that relationships should be at the center of teaching? And if so, how do you specifically in your own classroom keep relationships at the center of what you do?
Yes, because I don't think a kid is going to learn anything. I can't say anything. We got kids at home that we haven't seen, and I think they're still learning. I got to at least believe that, right?
But it's not the norm, but I agree with you.
I still try to communicate with those kids, and, when they do send me a reminder or whatever, I'm conversational instead of back to the, like a one-word answer or whatever. And how do I do that in my classroom? I try to just make sure, number one, names are huge to me, huge. I mean, you probably people don't even really know my real name or know how to say it, because I just have never, I thought, well, I'll come to an age or I'll be a professional and I'll use my full name. And I don't, and I won't. I don't even say it so, but people always pronounce it wrong. And so that's important to me, saying a kid's name right.
All right, so hold on. Let's take a time out really quick, right? So you're mentioning that people say your name wrong. So let's set it straight right here, so that when someone walks down the hall, they know what your name is and they say your name. So what is your name?
JoJo.
I know your name's JoJo. No, that's not what I'm saying. What's your name?
That is all I should hear in the hall. It's Johanna, or
Thank
Johanna.
you.
Technically, I'm named after my great-great-grandmother. I was born on the same day as her, and so her name was Johanna. It's German, and but growing up, so my grandparents, both my parents are from the north, so it's Johanna, like a soft A, but down here it's Joanna or Johanna, and that drives me nuts. And then people leave the H out, and there's an H, and you need to pronounce it, and so that drove me nuts. And I went by Joe through high school. You'll know who I've known for how long by what they call me. Yeah. So.
Well, that's why I just call you Momma House, because that's your name. But all right, sorry, we had to go there though, so people can actually call you by your right name. But you do prefer people to call you JoJo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So number one, I learned kids' names by the end of the first week, period. I know you by your name. As you're walking in class, I'm either telling you your name or you're telling me your name. And then if I have a hard time learning a certain kid's name, I don't know, because it to me doesn't match them or something. Sometimes it doesn't stick. I'll ask them to tell me something about themselves. Obviously, we always do get to know you things and fill out questions. But when you're reading a paper, it doesn't correlate to the kid because it's separate from them. And so I'll ask kids on the spot, tell me something about you, and that'll help me remember. And then I randomly ask kids, in class when they're doing their warm up and I'm checking attendance, I'll just randomly pick kids. Hey, what do you do outside of school? Hey, what was the best thing about your weekend? Hey, what did you, and I just kind of pepper it in all the time. And today I was sitting and we had a little time before the bell. Since we wiped tables down, they were a little too fast today. And, I was just kind of scanning and I'm like, okay, y'all do tennis, y'all are in basketball, y'all in my head, y'all are volleyball, you're football, these three I don't know. And I'm like, hey, what do you do outside of school? And he's telling, and then, the kid and he's one of the kids I thought maybe I'm not reaching, it's hard to read without facial expressions. And he made his way to my desk before he left and chatted with me for a little bit. And so.
Heart happy, right?
Huh?
Heart happy moment.
Yeah, for sure. Because you're just like, oh, when the kids actually seem to care that I care, or that, that's what I do. I just try to make sure I know something about them. I ask them if they've told me something about their life, their parent is sick, that I ask them about it later and make a point to let them know that I care and I'm listening. So.
I hearing you talk about that, those are the moments. That's what I love doing about teaching. Those things that are outside of your content, sitting down and talking with a kid. But JoJo, it comes from a place in your heart where you're like, okay, football, basketball, volleyball, band, cheer. Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. What do you do? Mm-hmm. Some people have the choice in that moment right there. Never mind. I don't want to bother having that conversation. But man, like Jojo, you don't understand what impact that can have on that kid for the rest of their life, because they got heard, they got seen, they got valued. Maybe it's that kid in your classroom that dresses not like you and like everybody else. Maybe they're goth, maybe they're whatever, but they have a story, like, and they just want their story to be heard. Maybe they don't believe the way you do, or dress the way you do, or have the same culture beliefs as you, but they're still human, you know? And so when you value that in a person, you never know what kid you can impact in what way. I think oftentimes people may confuse the idea of impacting a kid because you did something astronomical for them. No, it can be something as simple as what you did today, and asking a kid, hey, tell me about yourself. Like, what is it that you do? And they're like, me? Like, you want to know about me? Yes, I want to know about you. And so I actually had a situation today where I had a student in my class that needed some attention to. And her, for the past couple of weeks, have been like this. And I read into a lot of body language. And so I'm reading into this and I'm absorbing it. And I was looking for the right opportunity to sit down and speak with her. So something happened today outside of my classroom that was brought to my attention, so that when I walked into my classroom, I already knew that her mood was probably going to be off a little bit. And so, you know, I'm just kind of observing and whatnot. Totally scratched my whole entire lesson today, made something up on the fly, told the kids to get out their phones, go to this website, and I need you to research blah, 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 right? Meanwhile, I had to step outside and have a conversation, about 20, 25 minutes or so. And I think the student probably thought that I was going to get onto her for whatever infraction that she had at the time. But I just talked with her, had a conversation about life and everything else. And I can sense she was kind of like, but by the end of the conversation, like, we connected on a completely different level. So now I know for the rest of the year that she feels safe in my room. Because all I did was, you know, kids always think that they're going to be called out for something and go to the gallery and go to admin and do this and do that. But it's like, is that really going to help?
No, I don't.
They're going to go to the gallery and then they're going to come back to your room. They're not going to come back a different person. You need to intercept that. You need to intercede that. And you need to make a positive impact in that kid. And it can be something as simple as, tell me about yourself. And that's that connection piece. So,
well, another thing, I think we're talking about throwing out like tips, like tardies. I had a kid who was coming late every day to first period. And instead of in front of the class being like, dude, what's the deal? Or marking him, you know, tardy every day and moving on with my life, I just called him over and I was like, hey, what's going on? Because you never know. I mean, you really never know. And sometimes they might just be riding the bus and the bus is late and they don't even want to stay there at the bus. And so, you know, I always try to have those conversations on the side, and just having a hard time getting up. Okay, well, let's talk about, you want to be an athlete in college. You're going to be at practice minimum 15 minutes before it starts. You want to hold a job? This is what it's like. You don't get to show up even on time. You need to be early. And so I need you to work on that. I'll be doggone, he was on time today.
You're like, check.
So it's just that I try not to call kids out ever. I mean, unless it's, you know, a jokester that, you know, you've got that rapport with, you can kind of ham it up with them. But, you know, I try to have those conversations when you notice something's off. And then always point out the positive, like you were saying, someone who dresses differently from you. A friend of mine told me years ago when she was older, we were, I don't know, eating ice cream somewhere. And I said, you know, girl walked by. I was like, oh, she has a cute bag. And she was like, tell her. I was like, what? I'm not going to. She said, yes, tell her. Like, you should tell someone when you like something about them or anything positive you think of someone. And I do that now. And that is like a big part of who I am. And people sometimes are like, weirdo, like, I don't even know you. Or maybe a teacher, I'm sure some of you listening, I've probably done it too. And it's not to be like, I'm not doing it purposely. Like, I just want you to know, like, oh my gosh, your shirt's really cute today. You look really pretty today. Or I appreciate, you know, that's just a big part of who I am now. And I do that with the kids too. If you notice something, they're all dressed up for the day, or even if they're not.
We'll air high five it out, man. There you go. Hey, so something that I did, and I don't really share this a lot with people because these are just the kind of things. You asked me a question about, like, what's your thing? not last year, but the year before, I tried, and I failed at it at times, but I carried 10 pennies with me in my pocket. And so if you ever heard me walking around school, like my pants would jingle because I had 10 pennies in my pocket. But my goal was to give 10 compliments a day. And so whenever I gave somebody a compliment, I would move a penny over to the other pocket. So it would start in my left, and by the end of the day, I needed it to be in the right side. But just little things like that, that make people's days. I think it must have been the first couple of days of school, because I'm right there with you. I think we share that in common. I always want to compliment people. And two things where I complimented, because all we see is this part of the kids. We see their eyes. And so some people just have really pretty eyes, It's like, oh my gosh, look at your eyes today. They are just absolutely popping, like they're big. And of course, it makes them feel better in that moment, right? I had another student who dresses differently than everybody else. And she was dressed like Harry Potter. Like she had a bunch of stuff on that I could just tell, I was like, you got your inner Harry Potter going on today too. And she was like, how'd you know? And I was like, and I wouldn't have ever known that before, probably unless I had a previous conversation, because I'm not into that kind of stuff. But just making those connections with those kids. I know, no, I have to read my autobiographies, my self-help books.
Oh, Harry Potter's where it's at.
Unless it's Chronicles of Narnia, then I don't read it.
I can get with that.
All right. So we're going to kind of wrap things up on this interview here. So what I want to ask you now is, if you could thank any teacher on campus, has to be here on Steele's campus. If you could thank any teacher at Steele right now, who would that teacher be and why?
Linda Guerra has gotten me through a lot. This year, coming here and doing health science, it was only my second year doing health science when I started, and all of you guys were always so welcoming and helpful when I was over there in Q with y'all. And now I'm away from you guys, but I'm teaching principals for the first time. And I asked, I'm sure, the dumbest questions, and she is just always willing to talk to me. And I call her and I'm like, I'm so sorry. But she's always just has all the information and knows what's going on and is so helpful. And I just so appreciate that.
Awesome.
And can I shout out someone else? I was talking about him today. Alonzo got me through my first year too. He was my neighbor, and I would cry in my room, and oh my gosh, we had so many conversations, and I kept coming to work, so.
Well, that's awesome. Shout out to you guys for being amazing teachers. And that's it. So thank you, JoJo, for hanging out with me on this episode of Keeping Up with the Knights. I hope you have a wonderful day and be blessed as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Keeping Up with the Knights. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you subscribe and click the notification button so you know when the next episode is released, and then share it with your friends and colleagues. If you're so inclined to do so, would you please rate and review this podcast to help me grow our community of listeners? I hope there was something that you heard today that allowed you to connect outside the classroom. Now, more than ever, we need each other as a support system, and we need to continue to make this the best high school in the state of Texas. Thank you, Knight Nation. Now, go be someone's champion today.